Good evening, friends and family, and thank you for coming to another night with Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities Behind Black Business. And tonight we have another very exciting guest for you. Some of you may know him. This is Brian Mullins. And Brian is a longtime Chicago resident, and he's been involved in civic engagement, um, and he's been working to build strong communities through political education. If anybody knows what's going on with our businesses and the political system here in Chicago, it would definitely be Brian. So, Brian, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Denise. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. At the beginning, we always talk about Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities. We're a nonprofit foundation, and we came together as a group of people to try to do something to help our communities. You know, Brian, we have these discussions all the time about our problems. Right. And at the end, people walk away often saying, oh, well. But then there are people like you that are out here doing a lot of good work. There's a lot of other people out here doing good work. And so that's why we decided to try and do something to support our Black businesses. Yep. Because Black businesses can do so much for a community in terms of resources and providing support. Right. For the young people, community benefits agreements, you know, helping your expenditures and what you're spending out, giving entrepreneurial opportunities, you know, it's just so much. And we have too many businesses in our communities that where all the money is just going one way. Right. It's not coming back because they do not have a vested interest. So we felt it's very important to support our Black businesses. And as you know, Brian, we do have quite a few Black businesses here in Chicago, right?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a lot. It's a lot in Illinois, Cook County, and Chicago, and the surrounding areas. And we need to work with them to increase not only their business, but make them better business owners in our community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's why we do this podcast every week. We usually present a business owner, a Black author. We've had our bookstores on here, and we do work to help support our businesses. We've helped them get websites and different things. We've had events, and we plan to do more in the future. And we are working on our directory. And Brian said he's going to help us out. And so that's one thing. Absolutely. That's one thing that we want to do is get our directory up. But I mentioned our bookstores, and we are great proponents of our bookstores, Brian, because we feel knowledge is power. And unlike what most people think, we have more bookstores here in Chicago, I would say, than most people are aware of. Yes. So if you go to our website at rrgbc.org, we have listed the bookstores here. I have heard that we have a new bookstore in Hyde Park, and we have to find out who they are and introduce ourselves to them. But we are great proponents of our bookstore, our information, our history, our knowledge. We feature a Black bookstore on our podcast, or actually on our website, every month. And so this month, the bookstore is Frontline. You know, Frontline was in Hyde Park, They're still around. They have an online presence, and Say Cool vows that he's coming back to the South Side of Chicago.
Great.
But he does have online bookstore.com, and continue to support Frontline Bookstore. And Brian, I remember in young, especially a lot of young men would often come into Frontline to purchase books.
Okay. Yeah.
And they would come out with not one copy, but I've seen them with an arm full of books.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I've done it too, and just not just Frontline, but Hyde Park is good. There's a lot of bookstores, as you know, that are there. So, but we want to support our own, and you definitely get a different type of author in Black bookstores compared to the mainstream, as you're aware. So,
absolutely,
to our community's education.
And so we go a step further. We have a book giveaway. And all you have to do is subscribe to rrgbc.org, and you can become a winner of our book giveaway. We ask the bookstore to choose a book of the month, and we pay for the book. We pay for the shipping. We do ask you to contact the store and make arrangements for how you want to receive the book, whether you want to go to the store or you want us to pay for the shipping. Either way, we want you to get that book. And so Frontline recommended The Groundings with My Brother by Walter Rodney. He's a Guyanese intellectual activist. He led movements in North America, South America, Africa, and the Caribbean, and he supported the working class people. He taught how to think politics on the international scale, and he offers firsthand accounts of mass movement organizing. He inspired a generation of revolutionaries. This is an interesting read. So if you want to win a copy of this book, just go to rrgbc.org and subscribe. And then we do have a public policy piece that I would like to be talking to you about at some point, where we want the schools and libraries to give contracts to our Black bookstores.
Yeah, we could talk about that as we go in this convo here. It's important to that. It's all part of my spiel of government contracting. Yep.
Okay. And so if you go to Save Black Bookstores Chicago at change.org, you can sign our petition to show your support of that public policy piece that we're trying to get on the table. Okay. That's right. So we also support the Southside Community Federal Credit Union, which is located at 55th and Garfield. They have an anniversary event coming up soon. I think they have been there for 20, I know it's 20 plus years. I won't say the exact number of years, but they're having an anniversary celebration coming up. And they've been there giving loans and financial literacy classes and instruction and guidance to people for many years. And that's something that we need, a bank in our community that cares about us.
Absolutely.
And in order for a bank to thrive, they need you to open up accounts. So please consider going to the Southside Community Federal Credit Union at 55th and Garfield and opening up an account. Okay. All right. So let's get to our guest tonight, Brian. You know politics, you know civics.
Yes.
And this is, I think, a weak area for the majority of our people. I remember when Rahm Emanuel started the New City program for the immigrants.
Right.
And
all
civics,
the Americans. Yep.
Yeah. Civics was a part of the support and resources that they have to know how this government runs.
Right.
And I think that's one of our shortcomings. But Brian, I want you to tell us a little bit. I want you to tell us about yourself and how you got into politics.
Okay. So I am a lifelong Chicagoan South Sider. Grew up on 82nd and Blackstone. I currently reside in South Shore. I grew up in the 8th Ward. Was part of the John Stroger 8th Ward political organization, and a friend of the family from birth. And so that led me into being around that scene of politics. Then as I, went in, it got older, I was part of the Young Democrats organization,
Oh,
which
me
is just
too.
really, yeah, I was an A4 Young Dem, a Cook County YD, all those YDI, things. So all those are networking groups, and you kind of come together with other people from other organizations for, at that time, it was the Democratic Party, right? But as you know, in Illinois, Cook County, and Chicago, that's all we really have anyway. And it was the flavor of the day. And again, having the personal, connections to it, it led me there. Actually, the first campaign I ever worked on, I was 14 years old, putting up wheat paste posters for Richard Daley over Harold Washington, because John Stroger supported Daley, not Harold Washington, because Daley asked him first, and Stroger was a man of his word. So that's an interesting scenario. He did, he was cool with Harold, and they did have, but Daley asked for his support first. So we were working for him when I was 14. So I've been around the scene. I went into private business. I have a degree in computer science from University of Chicago, Illinois. But I went to night school, and I started working at a title insurance company. So from 18 to 39 years old, I was in the title insurance business, right? I happened to be the first black state manager in the title insurance business nationwide for First American, which is the largest company. That is another industry and corporate area that we are not involved in as a race in any way. If you're not familiar with it, the title companies are the ones where you do your real estate closings. So we prepare all the documentation and do all the legal legalities. And that led me to real estate investing, data acquisition, and other fields around real estate that I was able to kind of work in. My youngest son was born, and I basically quit work because I was working from 18, and I thought I was balling out. I thought I had all this money, which I did for a little while, like for years, right, in hindsight. And that led me at the time into, I had an opportunity. Todd Stroger was the county board president, and I was able to go around and learn about government, right? And what happens in government and how it happens and what's behind the scenes and policy and budgeting and all these procurement and grants. So I had a really fast 2.5 year education on the ground at a very high level of government and politics, because of course we have outside game that runs, right? And I was thrown into this mix. I was younger and I was naive. I believed government was for the people. And I learned for 2 years, it's not for the people, right? It's supposed to be, but it is not in any way. And it's probably gotten worse over the last, 13, 14 years. But what gives me hope is that it can be. Systems are there. They're not good or bad. It's the people.
It's the people
around the systems. It's always that hope that we can change it, that we can do things to spearhead and move our policy forward. One of the things you mentioned is civic engagement. Problem. I mean, a lot of these things are calculated. In hindsight, we realize, well, why did this happen? Civic education was taken out of the classroom of private and public schools. So I grew up, we had student council presidents, and we doing all these events all the time to learn about civic engagement. When I was young, I'm 55, but it hasn't happened for, I think, 24 years inside Chicago public schools. So we now look at the current climates about who votes, why they vote, what are you voting for, what's the possibilities. Most people don't have a clue because they've never spoken about it. And if you come from a household, maybe your parents don't vote, or your parents were not engaged civically. Civically means anything dealing with government or programs or school. Anything that government has its hand around is what we call civics at the end of the day. And what a lot of people don't realize is government is really in all your life, if you know it or not. Healthcare, business. Everything. You pay taxes to them. So they're in your pocket. They all over. And unfortunately, what we have to do now is educate people, especially younger people, so they can understand why this happens, what happens. When you see red light cameras or you see this or you see that, who do you call? Who made this decision? How do we get in front of issues? One of the problems in our community, since we've been so broken for so many decades, we're always behind. So we're always on the defensive. Something happens and then we want to come together and fight about it and try to be mad about it. But we have to be able to get in front of stuff, understanding where it's going, understanding the possibilities. So I think that's a big challenge for us. I think we're up to it. We have no choice at this point, right? And I think that's it's definitely so. Civic engagement. I have started a couple of organizations that have my hands around. Black Community Collaborative is one. Citizens for Civic Education, and which is doing civic education, and Black American Voter Project, and that is a nonpartisan organization to educate voters about election time and all that. Of course, in our communities, the number one thing is, why should I vote? What do I get out of it? Who cares? They don't do anything anyway, which I agree with, right? But we have to start to educate people as to the possibilities to push elected officials and candidates. So.
And I think it has to, it all happens. I think people become more concerned and aware about it during elections,
right?
But it really should be happening prior to elections, because that's where the work is, and we often vote people in, and then we sit back. And so now it's gotten to a point that many of, we say that our public officials are working for us, but now at least that's what they're supposed to be doing. But we've been so laxed, and now they don't even listen to people. People go to the office and you try to complain, or you get the runaround, and you go to the council meetings, and you're talking, and they're eating and drinking and not even listening to what you're saying. I mean, and it's made more people just kind of pull more away. Our voting percentage is poor. It's what, 30%?
We come out about a 30% clip. Yep. But we vote for the same people. So when you're talking about sheer numbers, we are a solid voting block, even though our overall vote totals decline, but everybody that does vote for the same people, which is a problem because they count on it.
What's happening with these people that are not voting?
So we talk about that a little. I think at the end of the day, we in Illinois, we're coming out of a system. So I can go back to Harold Washington, since we're in the same age group and people understand the Harold Washington era. There was a Black empowerment movement to get Harold Washington elected, in Chicago. But after he died in 1987, we didn't maintain. I mean, I was too young, so I don't blame myself, Denise. I don't know about you. No, but the system, Black people didn't maintain a Black side to politics. We got absorbed into the Democratic Party of Daley and Madigan. So we stopped organizing and talking and fighting for Black, and we started fighting for Democrat, which has no allegiance to Black. And so what we've seen over decades, 30, 40 years now, are policies that hurt our community. And so voters have just said, hey, what are we voting for? Every year you promise something. Our communities are getting worse. There's nothing stopping it. We see a class divide here in Chicago and Illinois. It's all over the country, but my biggest stuff is Illinois and Chicago, of course, because I live here. A class divide that comes out of that. There's less government hiring. So it's a systemic downgrade. And I think that's ultimately non-voter education and engagement, to your point, is the problem. But where we're at now is money in politics. So you have political action committees, unions, and special interests that drive the candidates and elected officials. They're not driven by the vote. Now, back in the day, your alderman or somebody would come by your house, ask you how your family doing, what do you need? Well, they don't need to do that anymore because they have millions and millions of dollars. And so that's just another way that they continuously push us out of the conversation. So the disengagement, in my opinion, is strictly because people don't see the value in voting. They don't understand, what are we doing this for every year? I've been doing it because my mama told me to, but our communities are getting worse. So we're pulling out of it until we can excite some candidates. So you see, We had some bumps in 2008, 2012 with Barack Obama for president. That had a tremendous turnout. Other than that, I mean, you probably going back 30 years, our turnout is, like you said, about 30%. It dips lower a lot. 2024 primaries, I think, was one of the lowest ever. 2023 primaries with Mayor Johnson. And that primary, that was one of the lowest ever. But again, I attribute that to, I mean, this general election coming up now will probably be pretty high based on the Trump Kamala Harris conversation. But, you know, it's going to be interesting because neither campaign is putting money into Chicago because they already accept Illinois to be a blue state, right? So again, this is what happens in our cycles. So they're not knocking on doors. They're not telling people it's election day. So there's not a solid voter outreach effort just to let people know it's coming up. So a lot of times, if you're not directly, you know, in tune to it, you just miss it or don't know for whatever reason. So that's a problem, but it's an orchestrated problem.
Well, you know, one problem I see, and here I do have to say, Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities, we're not a political organization. We do not support any political party. But I do think one of the major concerns is in this particular election, Black people aren't even on the table. You know, where, you know, they tried to push, you know, reparation conversation in there, you know, but locally, you know, and nationally, our issues and our concerns are not even on the table. And one of our major concerns here in Chicago is the lack of resources that have are going or should be going into Black businesses, because and so we ultimately don't have businesses in our communities. Whereas if you go up on the north side, your head is spinning around as you're driving down the street, because there are so many small businesses, and we know that small businesses are what drive the wealth in this country.
Right.
And
And even if you
so,
go
you know,
in
and I would
Pilsen and
like to,
18th Street, people
pardon
have
me?
businesses. Even if you go in Pilsen and other communities, there are businesses up and down the street all over the
the other
place.
communities,
I
all
sit
of
back
the
and
other
say,
communities.
I go on 18th Street and it's 10 Mexican restaurants, and I'm thinking, how are all of them still in business? Like, who's going there? But they are sustainable in their communities. We don't have that aspect in our neighborhoods right now. So that's a problem.
We used to have a lot of businesses in our community. What happened to our businesses?
So again, I grew up on 82nd and Blackstone, right off Stony Island. I remember Black businesses up and down 79th, 87th, Stony Island. They were all Black owned. It appears that the biggest problem we have was our own communities, which sounds a little bit backwards to a lot of people. We left our sustainable neighborhoods that we grew up in, and we moved away. A lot of people moved away, right? In doing that, those business owners also built their businesses up, and were small, let's say, and sent their kids to college, and their children didn't come back to run the business. They went into corporate America. So that the parent either gets sick or pass away. The kid is like, I'm not doing that hardware store, that, you know, whatever it is. And that allowed Asian and Hispanics, mainly, and Arab community, Arab members, to come into our community and buy our businesses. That's why you see gas stations, liquor stores, restaurants, you know, they just purchased them from our, probably the previous generation. I'm a Gen X, I don't know which time frame, but we're talking about in the 80s and the 90s. And we went through this great transition. Now, I mean, you're looking at probably 90% of businesses up and down our commercial strips are not Black owned. And that's part of the problem of economics, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show. If you don't have that, you need small business owners that live in the community and care about it. You want them to not only provide good business, but you want them to hire people here and there out of the community. And that makes a community, right? It makes us back to where we were at when we were growing up, and to bring some semblance of, you know, unity back in our community that we are missing. And it plays, in fact, you know, it plays a bigger role when you talk about development and people hear about development projects and you hear about stuff called TIF, tax increment financing, and SPIF, small business financing. And when the mayor, no matter what mayor it is or governor, they get on TV and they announce, oh, we have money for Black businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things a lot of people may not realize, it's I don't like it, because one of the problems they do is what happens is we don't own the building. So I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
We don't own the real estate in our community. So if you want to open up a business, a restaurant for say, and you get a government grant, you may build HVAC, ventilations to open your restaurant, redo the facades, fix the whole interior up, but you're a renter, right? So you use all this government grant money set aside for Black business to renovate a building that you don't own. Then
Mm-hmm.
if you go out of business 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line, you're just done. That building owner absorbs all that stuff that you fixed, and all the money put into that building is the owner's now, and you're just out. And I think a lot of times that's part of the problem, because, you know, a lot of our business don't survive well. Give you just throw some numbers in Illinois on the Black business side. The last survey coming out of the DCEO, which is Department of Economic Opportunity at the state, 66% of Black businesses were restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and the big spaces, right? So right there, that's a tremendous amount. And so most restaurants, no matter what the race or stuff, don't stay around for long. So it's kind of like they announce these business programs, and they pick the ones that are business like restaurants. You know, I'm kind of a conspiracy guy, Denise, so look at me crazy, but I think they do it on purpose, right? Because they know, hey, you go in, you go spend all. So like the Mayor Lightfoot program was something called Invest South and West. And
yes, I remember that program.
Corridors, right? 71st, 75th, 79th exchange and all that. And it's a perfect example. You know, people went in, got grants, businesses are now closed down in a year or two. And so we have to come up with a model that is more sustainable than just giving people money. I saw something on social media talking about some of the not-for-profit world, right? On how, you know, people come in with ideas and plans and they get monies and then they just disappear 4 or 5 years later, and we never see the fruits of the stuff that is set aside for our community, right?
So obviously there is a formula for what a community looks like, what a community is, and what types of businesses and services are needed in a community. Because we have them here in Chicago, we have them in the surrounding suburbs. We have very strong communities where they've got the stores, they've got the restaurants, but they also have doctors' offices, and they also have, you know, bakeries, and they have boutiques, and you got cleaners, and you have, you know, computer technology, you know, just all kind of, you know, the pet stores, pet grooming, and you know, auto mechanics, and just on and on, all the different types of services that you need. And I think what has to happen is we have to be able to designate that in Black communities. Okay, if we're going to say we have a community, then what does that community look like? Well, these are the kinds of businesses that we're going to have in our community. So it can't just be a plethora of restaurants and entertainment. Yes, you want restaurants.
Right.
Yes, you want entertainment, because you want to go and support and take advantage of businesses in your community.
Right.
You want that, but right now everybody, especially over on the south side and the west side, people are going. You not only have the business owners that, you know, because we said that dollar only circulates for 6 hours, right? So you not only have the business owners who have no invested interest in the community taking dollars out, but then you got the people who live there because what all they want to engage in or looking for is outside of the community. So it's a wonder we're still standing.
Denise, I agree, and I think that's such a multifaceted thing we have to deal with. We need
So if you were going to have a meeting about how to create a community and the types of businesses, what would be the conversations? What would be the points that need to be put on the table that we could go to our politicians to create some policy around to make sure that it happens?
right. So I think on the local level, in the small business and the neighborhood scenario, it's about us. It's about us taking a chance to trust each other, to work with each other again. As you know, Black people are quick. We'll jump and say, because somebody is offering us a cheaper price, we'll let other people come into our communities in construction and other different fields of this lawn care. But on the flip side, on the business owner side, they have to do a better job in customer service and fixing the problems that the consumers are tired of. And it's a sticky subject. I'll give you an example. We working on some stuff with the state on Black farmers, right? And you say, okay, we're trying to do the supply chain to bring Black farmers, to bring food into Chicago. But one of the problems is people are sitting back saying, but Brian, I can go on my app and order from Whole Foods. And we're trying to say, yeah, but you're supporting this Black farming cooperative. So we as a community have to kind of pull back a little bit and do something with a purpose, right? And that's why I'm excited. We talked about the membership directives to build memberships on both sides, right? We got to build a Black consumer back up and Black businesses and try to mend them together again. So the type of businesses, people talk about communities having grocery stores, hospitals, schools, our communities ultimately have to just about be rebuilt from scratch, for the most part, in my personal opinion, because we are lacking control of all those mechanisms in our community. And we have too many people that don't operate. You see people, I'll throw some names. You have rappers here in Chicago, Chance the Rapper is one of them, right? And Chance was interesting. Right. They put money into a theater in Bridgeport. And I'm sitting back thinking, boy, look, we couldn't even go to Bridgeport. So why didn't you fix the Regal Theater on 79th Street, right? And this is the mindset we have. And you have things like there's a Black guy that owns the Regal, and he's gone to the city for funding and dealing with Alderman Harris, and they shoot her down. Matter of fact, they threw him in jail one time. And you have all these from our
the guy that owns the Regal.
The guy that owned it was not supposed. He had Mayfair Dance Academy. I just tell the story. Hey, the secret. Mayfair Dance Academy held an event there. They were practicing. Somebody who worked for the alderman went in and called the police and said that this place was unfit. They shouldn't be in there. And next thing we know, this guy gets arrested. So the elected official and government side comes into play, because when you see the Riviera Theater, the theater in Bridgeport, these historic theaters on the north side, you see the alderman, the state rep, the government, they be like, oh, here's $70 million for the renovation. Everybody cheer. They bring in, and I'm thinking, but we don't have elected officials with the vision and they don't care enough about our communities to fight for that, even though they can. And that's, again, how it kind of ties together.
Well, what can the people do?
The people, this is where civics come in. You need to push the aldermen and the state reps and state senators to go get that money, to bring the money back to our communities. Not just if I'm not on your team or I'm not your friend or your sorority or fraternity brother, we still need you to bring it to the community, right? And that's just one of the problems. You also see in the same ward, you have restaurants like Fat Burger. Now, Fat Burger got one. It's in the old Seaway Bank building on 87th and like Greenwood. It's a little drive-through, you know what I mean? They got $1 million to renovate a little small thing. And I'm sitting back like, this doesn't match. So the key is the community putting pressure by calling, organizing, threatening the alderman to run them out of office, because that's the only thing they care about. And you would hope we wouldn't have to go through all that. But Denise, you said something at the beginning, and I'm going to co-sign. We really don't have any elected officials that fight for Black Chicago or Black Illinois every day, day in, day out. It just does not exist. We see other people in other communities have advocates. We see the Hispanic community advocating, for immigrants and everything else that's going on in Chicago. And you don't see anybody Black saying, hey, what about our communities? What about us? And that's a problem. And now So all we can do is to continue to try to educate, find candidates, and keep pushing them down the line. And what makes the government, and I get some people say, well, Brian, you all are begging, the government for this and all that. And if you allow me, if I could talk a little about the reparations side and how it ties together.
Yeah, we want to tie that in together, and I want to talk about it. And I want to talk about I want to talk about the immigrant side too.
Yeah, well, that's why I'll follow your lead. But so yeah, we really have to get to our elected officials. And so we need to organize in our community with like-minded individuals to put pressure on them. It's the only way to get their attention. It's the only way to win. Now, we have the governor and the mayor are in, precarious situations. They don't have the support, especially the mayor at this point. So, sometimes maybe you can go directly to the mayor instead of the alderman. So it's a lot of nuances to it. It shouldn't have to be like that. But the biggest thing, Denise, is we're talking about these businesses that are small. Now, I'm not questioning anybody's business. I'm not, whatever level your business is, how much money you make. I don't make any money. I'm trying. But the key is we're not employing. So other communities come through and they employ. And see, that's the whole key to it all, right? So we don't have businesses that are heavily employing Black Chicago. So we're not the major employers at all. So we don't even bid on contracts that have large employment. I don't care.
And I think we're like 12% of the businesses compared to immigrants who were like 30 and 40%, and definitely outweigh us in terms of industries. And what I wanted to say about that is, as you talk about Black businesses, when Black people try to come together and, like the Africa Town they tried to create in Detroit.
Sure.
The immigrants came forward, the Mexicans, the Arabs, I think of the Koreans, and they used their civic knowledge and pushed against it.
Yep.
It's development. And then the same thing most recently, the young lady that played Rudy on Cosby show, she started a foundation. I think it's called Fearless.
The Fearless
Fund. And she's been giving away grants to small Black businesses. And now she's being sued because her organization is race-based. So, you get this kind of Black people try to do the same thing all of these other ethnic groups are doing. And then they turn around and call us racist. And this is where I think reparations is going to be important, to try to give us some protection as a protected class of people from all of this, because we're constantly being sabotaged and infiltrated,
undermined by our own people,
everything,
it's all of it.
so that's why I think reparations is important, because this whole immigration piece, it's had an impact on our businesses, if you want to speak to that.
Sure.
At all.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are my favorite subjects. So I am a reparations advocate. I've been around the current reparations movement since about 2015, 2016, on a national level through American Descendants of Slavery and ADOS movement. We started, a buddy of mine, Marlon Watson, we started ADOS Chicago in 2016. And that is to make us, at the time, it was to give us a protected class called ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery. I mean, anybody tied to chattel slavery on U.S. soil, not around the world, not in the Caribbean, but on U.S. soil, right? And from the American side, that has moved to the Black American freedmen. So you mentioned what Rahm Emanuel did in 2011 under Barack Obama while he was president. They instituted the Office of New Americans. And if anybody's listening, you can Google Chicago Office of New Americans. It is a 60-page document laying out everything that we need, right, in our communities and what we need government to do for us. So we have taken that and drew up Office of Black Americans. which is for a specific group. Now, this is kind of how, we see when you talk about business. We are 30% of the city of Chicago population, 30% of Cook County, 15% the state of Illinois. The budgets, so reparations is a federal issue for us, right? We figure, like if you fall in Walmart, you don't sue the store, you sue the corporation, which would be the U.S. government. But on the local level, we call it equity. Can we use their words that they came in with? We want equity. Well, we want equity too. So we want 30% because that's our population, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you translate that to real world time, so if you take the state budget, which is $54 billion, the county budget, $11 billion, the city of Chicago, and its sister agencies. Now, don't forget, you got CHA, CPS, Park District, I don't know, all these 7 taxing bodies, Water Rec. So you got 9 government bodies that tax all of us every day, right?
Right.
Property tax bills. When you add those budgets up, it's like $120-something billion a year. So we're saying, okay, if we get 30% of that, it would infuse $25.4 billion in contracts and employment into the south and the west side of Chicago, strictly at numbers. Strictly at its face, right? Just give us that opportunity. So one of the problems, and I got to get all these out so we can, I can wrap this up. But what happens is they created what's called an MBE program, Minority Business Enterprise. You have Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, Women's Business. They have LGBTQ business now. You got all these groups. The government sets goals at about 27% minority procurement. Okay, so I've sat in rooms with Jamie Reed, the head of procurement in Chicago, and I say, Jamie, why do we sit back and accept 73% of all contracts off the top going to white males? Right? That's a valid question that nobody questions. So all women are included in minority women, not just black women. It's white women also. So the wives and the daughters of the men, just start the same business with a different name, and they go in and get contracts. So actually, Alderman Raymond Lopez put in an ordinance in the city of Chicago for the 15th Ward, and it would give us 30% and Hispanics 30%, which was interesting, right? Because they're also 30% of the population. And so you're talking about raising up all these communities. We got to get that to be equitable. But then again, you got all these spinoffs. So that's important because we the way we look at it, at least, is to drill it down to us and our communities. If you can get black companies contracts, then they can then hire black people from the community or from the city of Chicago to work in our black businesses, and then bank at the black credit union. And now we cooking with grease finally, right? And that's where we got to get to. So we're on that pathway to get there. But, and I love what your organization is doing. That's why I'm excited about this. So there are probably 40 to 50 organizations that's supposed to be doing what your mission is. And I'll say it. You ain't got to say it. They're not doing a very good job because we are still at the bottom. We are not getting contracts. They are not bringing in business. They are not mentoring. I'm talking about, now I can say it. It's talking about chambers and SSAs and all these groups that get funded to do it. And so I'm always on 10.
Well, what is the missing link here? Because we do have a lot of organizations out here, I know they're getting lots of dollars.
Well,
so what's wrong?
I'll give you my opinion, and I've studied it, and that's why I think we're gonna fix it, right? We're gonna move past it. And when I say that, when you talk to, so I'll give you an example. I was on this business advisory commission for Governor Ronner with Willie Wilson. Willie Wilson was leading it. We sat back and we identified all these contracts, right? And then we sat back, and there are not enough black businesses. We're not even in most of the industries that government has contracts in. So there are contracts out there for rubber bands and shoes. It's literally everything. And I pulled up earlier.
You need to be manufacturing.
You can manufacture. So, right. So there we go.
Manufacturing to deal with some of these types of businesses.
But you can also, in this world, you can contract out. You can just start a business, say, selling rubber bands. And all you got to do is order them from China. and just have a profit based on what you go charge. And you ain't even got to do anything. So these are the little small, these are opportunities. All it takes is for somebody to do it, right? And so you really, manufacturing is the best because we can employ, right? Also, but even just getting these contracts fulfilled in today's world with drop shipping and all that, you don't have to own, you don't have to be the actual supplier, right? Which is interesting. I see some couple comments. That is true too. We have a generation of blacks that won't hire other black people from the community. So we got all these class issues and these other issues in that. But to go back to it also appears, so I've been in rooms where I asked these head of these chambers and said, hey, what happens when there's a contract for, widgets? And in your directory, or who's a member, let me first and foremost say, they don't have directories. So if you right now go to these chambers that are fit county, they don't have a directory on their website. You would think that's the first thing you do, right? Let's show.
Especially if they're focused on black businesses.
Would think so, but they only care about their members. Now, if you only got 50 members, let's just say only. Let's say you got 50 members, and your members don't sell widgets. They don't do construction. They don't do this. I asked a question in the largest chamber. I said, hey, so what happens when government has contracts, but you don't have a member? He said, then we don't deal with it. I said, okay. So here we go again. Instead of working for the collective black community to help all entrepreneurs, you only help people who pay you, even though you've been paid by government to do it. So to answer your question, it's the individual organizations that are only putting out a post on Facebook about stuff. They're not getting to business owners effectively communicating. They're not communicating to the thousands of potential. Give you an example. It's 141,000 black businesses registered in Illinois. 141,000. Okay. But if you look at the MBE, WBE list, we're at about 2,300. Now you got to say, with all these groups, why wouldn't you be spending your day trying to get business owners to see like what we're talking about, sign up as an MBE so that we can help you when this stuff come up for bid, whatever your service is. The government pretty much buys everything. It buys full. Literally anything you can think of, the government buys. So every business can somehow, more than likely, get a contract or get in a bid. And it doesn't cost anything to bid. It just costs you time, right? So once you fill out the paperwork, you go from there. But I think just connecting that all together, and what I can,
that's making me think about when Chicago Public Schools were on what's that, 39th Street?
Yeah, yep.
And they had a warehouse.
Yep.
And they had everything in there because we could order.
Yep.
And it was like a penny for this, 20 cents for that. Yeah. Like you say, rubber bands, pens, pencils, just anything you could think of that you needed. Sure. And somebody was supplying them with those products.
If we think about food service alone in Chicago Public Schools, stuff like that. In the jail system, the county jail, somebody's providing every cookie, every carton of milk, every green bean. So, you could tie it to farming and things you could tie it to all kinds of stuff. One of the problems
what you're saying here, Brian, is we need to have discussions about the different types of businesses that we can actually have.
Absolutely.
They don't all have to be restaurants and bakeries.
Right.
We need to broaden, that, because that's what you see when you go into other communities.
Yeah. And maybe you mentioned books. In that case scenario, you have a lot of school districts across the state. I want to say it's about 600 across the state. And so in that effort, the state, what you would do is go to CPS, for example, but it's about 600 across the state, right? But if you go to CPS, you have to sign up to be on the procurement side of CPS or let one of the principals or somebody allow you to be a vendor. And then you shop the book to the school. Now, what can happen, the principal, in my opinion, how this can make happen, because 41% of CPS principals are black women. Then what if they all bought 100 books from the bookstores you're working with and all that. Right now we got 100 or 110 black schools, I think 150 something maybe, or whatever it is. So I'm just saying, even to purchase and to get our stuff going, it's possible if we just pushed it the right way. You know what I mean? So if you come up with a book on civic education or history, there's no reason the bookstores can't sign up to be vendors for CPS and then try to push some of their books. Just like reps from, I don't know, Hardcore Brace, I think that's what it's called, right? One of these publishers go in and lobby CPS to purchase their materials. Our bookstores need to do the same, right? And I think that's just a way in. The money is there, of course, and we just got to get the principle to get everybody percolating on the same picture. But no ifs, ands, buts about it. We have a give example. You got like the Obama Center. I talk about that a lot because you had a big advocacy outreach effort and this big show on hiring black businesses. Well, at the end of the day, it comes back down. We are about 4% of black businesses, 2% of the employment on the Obama Center. So even though you had these efforts that come out and they act like they're doing something, it never, ever, ever works out. So one of the things that I did, I was one of the guys as a consultant that came to the community and promised jobs on construction sites, right? I would say, yes, we got contracts for you. We got jobs. And I believed it until I did a couple of the projects. I got paid, but guess what they really was paying me to do? Not do anything, right? Yeah. And I got fired and kicked out of that industry because I kept saying, where are the contracts for black people? Why don't we have jobs? You know what I mean? And that's not what they want to hear. They just want to say it and have a press conference, probably a gala, but they're never delivering anything. And we see that with our current mayor. Same thing. They talk about this black all day. So I'm going to jump real quick is when you talk about lineage. So we talked about the lineage side. With what's happening with the Fearless Fund, same thing with the Harvard admission is it was race-based. So for the viewers that are not familiar, race and ethnicity and lineage are different. Race is a skin color, black, white, or Hispanic. Again, like I said, we consider, so there are 1.4 million Black American freedmen in Illinois, right? And there's about 200,000 blacks that are not Black American freedmen. So by far, nationwide, the number is about 44 million people called black in America, but 40 million are tied to chattel slavery on U.S. soil. The other 4 million are black immigrants, African immigrants, other people like that, right? And that's important because the Supreme Court in the affirmative action ruling left open the door for lineage-based support, right? So we're not looking for black businesses to get contracts. We need freedmen business to get contracts. So 3 out of the top 5 construction companies, for example, in Illinois are Nigerians, and they don't hire us. So you got one, and you don't mind me naming, well, you got one on 71st and Stony, one on 78th and Stony, and they're both Nigerian owned, and they're the flavor contractors of the year, and they get all the contracts. But if you go in their office or you go to their work sites, Black Americans are not working on their job sites. So again, while I talk about ethnicity like I do, because it is important, because if we can't directly tie contracts and employment to the people living in households in the South and the West Side, then we're not doing it right, because we can't measure. We don't ever see a collective come up of that. So the government satisfies this 27% quota with black. That black doesn't translate to us. And so we miss out on the economics that we shouldn't. So those are policies. That's why civic engagement is important. You got to, and let me say this. What's funny, not funny, but the next layer is we have a whole class of black people that have become sole source contractors. So you can be what's called a construction manager, which is a position that kind of oversees stuff. But guess what you don't do? You don't hire anybody. You don't hire plumbers, tradesmen, none of that. So what a lot of our companies now are construction managers. If you're the owner, you're like, this is great. I get to make all this money and I ain't even got to hire. I ain't got to do too much. You know what I mean? And the government or the contractor satisfies its black set aside with one person compared to employment or uplift of a lot. And that's the next layer of the problem. So we also have black businesses as a black community. You have black people that don't live in our community, don't hire from our community. So we got to have I mean, I got my opinions on it, but we probably need a collective come to Jesus conversation. Well, what do you do? I mean, what does that mean? Because when you're getting Black set aside contracts for us, you should be adding more to our collective community than you.
Right.
So I say it to them, they get mad at me. It's almost like the non-Black people that have businesses in the Black community. If all you do is drive in from Olympia Fields, take all our money and drive back, spend your money in Olympia Fields, well, you doing the same thing that every other race does to the poor Black community, right? So
That's
you
right.
got all these
That's right.
layers that we got to talk about as a people to break through before we can ever really get this going correctly.
Well, that's why I think reparations is so important.
Yep.
And I think that's why the politicians are skirting around it.
Yep.
Nobody wants, and nobody outside the Black community wants it to happen.
Nope.
You know,
And a lot
because
of us don't want it to happen.
because everybody's getting our dollars.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and but I think that is something that we really need to fight for, because it's like whatever we try to do, how do we protect it?
Right.
You know, you
Yep.
can say, you know, I think I was listening to Tariq Nasheed talk about this on his show, and he was saying that we need to all be on code, you know, like they were back, you know, during the Bus Montgomery boycott. You
Right.
know, everybody knew that this is what we needed to do, but we just kind of not right there, you know.
Right.
So even for our own protection from some of
Right.
our own misgivings,
Yes.
reparations can help to put,
Yep.
you know, a layer of protection around all of this, so you can begin to look at, because as you're talking,
Yep.
I see people needing to be trained. I see schools need to be built, you know, and certain, you know, education needs to be put in place to prepare people
Literacy
to begin to
programs.
even have these types of businesses. You know,
Right.
property needs to be owned, land needs to be owned, and you need to be protected from these people who are going to come in and say, "Oh, you can't do this," you know,
Right.
well, because this is racism, you
Right.
know.
And Denise, I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you mentioned when we talked about Harvard and the Fearless Fund earlier, the Supreme, I don't know if I repeated this, but the Supreme Court left the door open to lineage-based admission. So if the Fearless Fund says we're giving money to Black American freedmen businesses, that's probably, at least we're believing, when somebody pushes that to the Supreme Court, that'll pass, but not Black. You know what I mean? And right, it's the Black haves versus the Black have-nots, and unfortunately, that's a battle and conversations we need to have. And I have it every day. And I can say pretty strongly, the Black haves don't really care. And when I say they don't care, they're not willing to fight for the Black have-nots. So they might lose.
But they need the Black have-nots.
And that's what we try to come to Jesus.
So that's where, you know, you got to have, as you say, come to Jesus moment. You got to come down here and say.
And that's part of our community. And I'm the one that, you know, by far, the majority are in the have-not side. So it's up to us to organize the have-nots, try to give them a plan and some hope, the hope that we can push that 30% up and bring out new voters that will go towards somebody with a plan for us. And I don't, you know, we could talk a little quick politics. When we talked about, you know, Kamala Harris came out, man, she came out a couple of days ago with a plan for Black men. It was legalization of weed, cryptocurrency. I mean, it was insane. I'm like,
it's never going to. I mean, how many more ways do?
I mean,
how many more ways do the wolves need to show you who they are? You know what I'm saying?
She will never go to a white community talking to white men saying we got weed for you. Yeah, they and cryptocurrency that everybody go use and mentor programs. I mean, come on, it's not. We need to rebuild the Black families. We need to rebuild Black communities. Black schools, Black literacy. We need to do that. We don't care. All the rest of that crap is out the door. So, you know, we need to practice cooperative economics, you know, and you mentioned a credit union. We got a meeting with them in I think a week and a half, because part of this base conversation we're trying to have. So real quick, there is a reparations commission in Illinois that is currently working, just like you all saw in California. Chris Lodgkin and the guys in California were former ADOS members that we work with. They went through their thing there. they got screwed by black congressmen. Okay, at the end of the day, they turned their back on them. Black people shut down the reparations movement in California. So we're expecting the same to happen in Illinois next year, right? And so we're trying to prepare the black community to stand up together, because we're going to get the same result by J.B. Pritzker if we don't stand up together as a particular group. But in that reparations bill, we've met with, I'm not a member, I'm an ad hoc member of that commission, but the people who do procurement at the state of Illinois are ready. They're ready for black people to come get contracts under this reparations commission, but it's going to be up to us to make sure that they're stable, that they have funding. And so we're trying to work with credit unions. We want our own, at the end of the day, we want our own Freedman credit union that we can go and say, deposit money, state of Illinois, city of Chicago, to help make this credit union solvent. So when we get contracts, we can loan our own businesses money that are members of the credit union, and they can employ people and open up checking accounts in our credit union, and our money stays in there to help mortgages, car loans, business loans, you know what I mean? And it sounds like, I'm not trying to reinvent a wheel. We just don't do it for ourselves. And a lot of times it's because the people in charge of it, elected officials or the heads of these organizations, don't believe or don't see the power of 1.4 million people as a consumer group. We can be self-encapsulated. And I'll say, Denise, before we go or whatever, I think one of the biggest problems we had in our country is integration, because we gave up our towns. We gave up our schools. So you mentioned businesses having law firms and hospitals. We had all that.
That's right.
Assimilated. Well, we allowed other people to come into our community, take the wealth and the jobs out of our community, and we didn't get any in return, because you don't have black teachers teaching in white schools. You don't have, it didn't reciprocate. So we just lost. And in 2024, and the way I talk about it, we need to teach our children, you got to pull back from that and self-encapsulate. Just like there's a Chinatown, just like we talk about Pilsen, we need our own communities to be strong first. Then we can work with everybody else as a unit into city of Chicago.
See, they claim that they built their Chinatowns because of the discrimination against the Chinese people at the time. And that's why they have all of these Chinatowns. But that's not totally true, because everywhere I've gone, every country I go to, there's a Chinatown. Everybody's not discriminating against you. You're coming there for, economic development, and you got your own little communities and you got your own little setup. But I don't see any way out of this but through reparations, because that's going to protect us from all of these scams and schemes, and that everybody are going to come up with, to try to block what it is that we're trying to do.
And then I want to add, we touched a little bit on immigration and what's happening in Chicago. Well, we also have to protect, we talk about other black people. So black immigrants are in Chicago. Guess what they do? They go in their own communities. They got their own stores. They practice it. Black Americans don't practice it. Everybody else, Ghanaians, Jamaicans, they deal with their own kind inside of Chicago, but then they come back to be black when white folks mess with them. Now they want to be black again. But until that,
or when there are when there are opportunities, and resources, on the table,
they come as black.
So you get to be,
my immigration conversation is the same for everyone that's non-American. If you're black, Hispanic, white, from the Ukraine, at the end of the day, it's the same result. But for us, black immigrants are used by the white establishment to replace us. So white people can say, we did give you black contracts, Brian. What are you talking about? I said, hey, but you didn't give it to the class of people, the lineage of people who all the data is for, who everybody says at the bottom of economics, at the bottom of business. You didn't help this group of blacks. You satisfied it with a color, not a lineage. And I think that's what makes it important. And that ties back into reparations, because we can get a shot in the arm. I mean, look, we've seen them give out money from the migrant process, just unlimited money across the country. In Illinois, it's costing us about $1.5 billion so far, right? And that's a lot of money. And people want to always, And people want to say, well, Brian, that money, it could have went. I said, no, because it was in line for us because we're the bottom caste. So there was nobody else that meet those qualifications. But then you brought in 52,000 people into Chicago and started giving them the housing money, the food money, the medical money, whatever else to get their feet in the ground that would have gone to Black Chicago. And that is true. No matter what people try to go around that. It's not true. It was meant for us. Most of that money came through COVID, the American Recovery Act funds. They weren't even here. So why they getting our COVID funds? And it's funnier.
Our government has a responsibility to protect the people of this country internally and externally. And you're not doing that, at least not for this group of people in this country. And as far as I'm concerned, the people who come here from other countries as immigrants, you get your reparations when you get to come here, because you're definitely getting a leg up. Your quality of life is improved from where you have come from, and many people, I'm going to say this because we are past the top of the hour, but many people who come here are really not truly cognizant of the extent that our people have contributed to this country, to the creation of this country, to the way you are treated when you come over here. They're just not cognizant. They're not appreciative of, and don't realize. I was listening to a conversation with a guy, I think he was from the Congo, and he was, white people built the railroads and white people built the skyscrapers and just not aware of our contribution to that. Even those three women who used their calculations from their own brain, those three Black women that helped send them off to outer space. There's so many things that we have done. And so we have to continue to fight for this.
And educate.
That's right. That's right. Because this is what we're going to need in order for our businesses to thrive, in order for us to even try to create communities. We got to be protected. Absolutely. And I think reparations, we need to continue to push it, and we need to push it hard.
Yep. So Denise, I'm available to come back anytime. And
absolutely, we would like especially updates on reparations and on how people can get involved,
and even start to educate
should be doing, and how we can begin to just maybe begin to have some little classes on civics here, and how people can begin to get involved and make a difference, because they're banking on us not saying anything.
They're banking on nobody, and people like us are out here, and we're trying to go ahead and make it happen. And that's important, that we are the ones tied to the ground, and we need to create that groundswell, and then we can handle on the political side. They'll listen to the message if we can show up on our own. So that's
right.
So, all right.
That's right. Well, this has been very stimulating conversation. Like I said, Brian, you have so much information.
It's a lot. And so I need to come back.
So much out.
But I appreciate you inviting me on, and I'm ready to come back whenever. And I'll be talking to you soon, so we can get the directory up and going, and we come back and report on that next time and start to bring businesses in. So I think we're ready to grow this thing and make some stuff happen. So
I'm looking forward. I want to thank you for coming, and family. Remember, go to rrgbc.org and subscribe, where you can win our book of the month. You can also make donations to our organization to help us with our efforts. But most of all, I want you to remember to support Black businesses, because when you support Black businesses, you're supporting yourself.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay.
Good. All right. Thank you. Night. All right, guys. All right. Bye.
you.